je suis descendu de l'avion, j'ai tout de suite voulu rentrer au Rwanda.
J'ai jamais senti en fait vraiment de différence entre le fait que moi je suis adoptée et pas les autres en fait.
Je me suis construite comme une enfant blanche finalement. Comme une enfant blanche de l'intérieur et asiatique de l'extérieur.
Now, that was a clip from Amandine Gay's upcoming documentary Une histoire à soi, or A Story of One's Own. Gay is an Afrofeminist filmmaker and researcher. She wrote the foreword for the French translation of Bell Hooks' seminal book on black feminism, Ain't I a Woman? She's also an adoptee and the founder of a Francophone Adoption Awareness Month, and she joins me on set. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Une histoire à soi is a documentary about international adoption. It's made almost exclusively from interviews with 5 people who were born outside of France, who were adopted by French families. In it, we hear them talking about race, identity, and belonging. How important was it for you to approach this very complex issue from the point of view of adoptees?
Well, I'm always trying to make the film that I needed to see when I was a teenager. And so I think it's really important to start with life stories because everybody can identify to them. But it's also a good way to politicize the issue. Because quite often when you're talking about adoption, especially in the media or for the general public, it is quite centered on emotions and sentiments. And of course, those are parts of all families' history. But in adoption, you have racial issues, you have displacement issues, especially if it's transnational adoption. You have a whole range of political things that are happening even in the relationship between, parents and children, and it's really rarely tackled. So it was important for me to bring that forth, but using people's life stories so that adoptees could relate to the stories and feel empowered by the political aspect of it.
Indeed. I'm going to bring a quote from your film of one of those people you interviewed. He says that people always say, thanks to our parents, we got a family. And they never say, thanks to us, our parents got a child. Your documentary really challenges that notion that adoptees are or should somehow be always grateful to be in this kind of relationship. Tell us a bit more.
Well, I think first, no one asks biological children to be grateful, or not in such a public way as is asked for adoptees. And I think it's really interesting to realize that because adoptees didn't have a voice for a long time, and we mostly heard either prospective parents or adoptive parents, this issue of gratitude was centered on adoptees, but never on the people who could have never started a family without children who were displaced and who were separated from their families. So to me, it's just that it's important sometimes to try and reverse the angle on an issue, so that people can realize that maybe it's not as clean-cut as they thought,
All right. Let's take a look now at a clip from A Story of One's Own.
Quand on parle avec les gens de l'adoption, c'est toujours grâce à nos parents, on a eu une famille. Et jamais que grâce à nous, nos parents ont eu un enfant.
On n'est pas une coquille vide qui arrive et tu le formates à ton image.
C'était un moment clé où j'ai décidé que j'allais intégrer toute cette partie de mon histoire, en faire une espèce de grande histoire avec les 2 familles.
On vient de quelque part et on est le fruit d'une histoire avant et de choses avant. On vient de quelqu'un.
Now, in your film, some of your interviewees talk about what it was like to be raised by white parents when they themselves aren't white. Is it possible to extract interracial adoption from white savior complex?
Well, I think it's possible as long as parents are prepared to be political about racial issues. And that's why you see that there's a tension in France because there's such a taboo on race. And so it's really complex to have children of color, black children, for instance, which is my case, brought in white families where sometimes those families won't be able to discuss race, to accept even race as a social construct. That's where we're at in France right now. It's a debate whether race has an impact in people's lives. So when you're an adoptee, your well-being is going to depend on how political your parents are on racial issues and how willing they are to really, engage it as anti-racist. There's Ibrahim X. Kendi that released a book last year, and he says that there's nothing as such as non-racist, and I think it's really important. Either you do the work as an anti-racist, or you are part of white supremacy. And I think that's something that all white adoptive parents need to understand. There's no safe space of like, I'm open-minded and I'm a citizen of the world. You have to work actively to dismantle white supremacy for the well-being of your children.
Absolutely. Now, you've also lived and worked in Canada before. That's the country that attempted to forcibly assimilate Indigenous children by adopting them out to white families. France, too, was accused of deporting minors from Reunion Island, for example, from the 60s until the 80s. In cases like this, what do you think governments should do today?
Well, nowadays, governments should really be prepared to face their history and even to address the need for reparations. And I think that when you look at France, they've been willing to do it to a certain extent from the people from the Reunion Island that were displaced forcibly, from the 60s to the 80s. But so far, there's nothing that's been done or said from all the indigenous people in French Guiana who've been placed in what was called les hommes indiens, who were, modeled on the residential school system in Canada and the US. And it's, decades, if not centuries, of indigenous children also in New Caledonia, etc., who have been suffering the same types of practices. So I think that, and even if you look at illegal transnational adoptions, I think that the French government in that particular case has still a lot to do, because so far, Malian adoptees have been trying to get a trial for 2 times last year, and the judge refused to move forth. And there's a recent case of adoptees and adoptive parents who have been trying to go to trial regarding illegal transnational adoptions in Ethiopia, and we're still waiting to see if the judge is going to accept and put the case forward. So to be able to do something, you also need all the instances around adoptions to be able and willing to, again, do the work.
Do the work, indeed. Now in France, people can give birth anonymously, and you've been very vocal about the rights of adoptees to have access to medical information, for example, of their biological parents. And currently, lawmakers here are debating a new bioethics bill in which the anonymity of IVF donors could be lifted. How, if at all, are the two issues linked?
Well, I think that what's interesting is to see how you can use the experience of adoptees to not make the same mistakes over and over again. And so what the situation of adoptees born under X, which is my case, has shown is that we do need our medical history, and we do need our medical history throughout our lives. So for instance, a donor could be very healthy in his 20s, but then later on develop some illnesses that the family or the person who was born from IVF will need to be aware of. And so that's why, to me, there's an importance to maintain a link with donors or with birth parents, because, of course, your medical history is going to evolve throughout your life. And so the information you're going to need as an adoptee are going to be different from the time you're born to the time you're trying to have children yourself, or even when you're older.
Mm. Now, your first film, Speak Up, gave a voice to Black women in a way I'd never seen before in French cinema. You used very close-up shots to interview Black, French and Belgian women of different faiths, different sexualities, who all face discrimination because of the colour of their skin. Let's take a look now at the moment where you asked interviewees if they could name 5 Black French actresses.
Je ne saurais pas te dire 5, non, pour moi c'est beaucoup. Oh, 5
Bon, évidemment, Aïssa Maïga. Ensuite... putain, Aïssa Maïga. Bah alors, Aïssa Maïga...
Bah quoi, Aïssa Maïga. Toujours.
Now, what you just saw there is the part of Speak Up that inspired actress Aïssa Maïga herself to organise a collective manifesto called Black is Not My Profession, lamenting the stereotypical roles given to Black women in films. France 24 recently had the opportunity to interview Aïssa Maïga. Here she is speaking about the importance of representation.
France has a history of colonization. France has colonized Asia and Africa, many countries in Africa and in Asia. And this is why today our population is so diverse. We have a diversity in terms of ethnicity, in terms of race. And to me, it's not about complaining. It's about telling, okay, what do we do now with what we are? And I think we should be very proud of that, of who we are as French people in a very diverse society. And we should bring this on screen.
Now, Amandine Gay, you yourself used to be an actress and now you're a filmmaker. Do you have any concrete suggestions for better representation of French society in French cinema, like Aisamaga suggests, not just ethnic minorities, but also sexual minorities?
Well, I would say first, give us the money. Like we are completely capable of making our own films. And I think that as long as you have diverse voices, you're going to have diverse and complex ways of representing all minorities. So I'm thinking of a group now that's called Représent Trans. And so they have an Instagram account and a website that is available for all filmmakers when they want to either represent trans people on screen or if they want to hire trans actors. And I think, of course, we can give all those tools, but I think the basics is, do producers or film institutions see us as human beings? And do they feel that all our stories and narratives are worth telling? And so I think that if you think that's the case, then you're going to start funding our films properly. And if you do, then you're going to have all types of stories that are bring forth, and that will be, of course, less stereotyped, because when it comes from us, it is about us as human beings and not just us as Black people.
All right, Amandine Gay, your film Une histoire à soi is coming out in French cinemas in June. Your autobiographical essay called Chocolate Doll is being published in September. And the 4th edition of Le Mois des Adoptés, Adoption Awareness Month, is taking place in November. Good luck with your very, very busy schedule ahead. As with all our guests, we've asked you for your cultural pick of the moment, and you chose the album Noir Brésil by musician Yindi. In just one sentence, how would you describe it?
I think it's really both fresh, but also profound in a way, at least for me, it moved me. I'm in a moment when I need sort of like something that's really sweet. And this album has that too, so that's why I picked it.
All right, we'll leave you with a music video from that album. Remember our website. We're also on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.